Hello everybody and welcome back to another Playbuffer tutorial. In this video I'm going to be going over how collisions work in Playbuffer and showing you how to implement your own collision systems into your own games. This tutorial is going to be following directly on from my previous tutorial on animations, so I'm going to be starting with the code that I had there. So if you haven't given that a watch, I definitely recommend doing so before you get on to this one. So like I said, starting with the same code I had last time, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to press play. And we see what we have last time. If I go ahead and I press F1 on my keyboard, I'll bring up debug mode. You can see in the top left some Playbuffer information that really isn't that important. But the stuff we're interested in, firstly we have these red squares around each of our objects. This is just to denote the sprite. It's just a box around the sprite. And we can also see these blue circles at the top left of each of our sprites. These circles are the collision boxes. I'm using the word boxes because Unity uses collision boxes a lot, so I'm just trying to keep it consistent. If you haven't encountered collision boxes in Unity yet, you will very soon, and it's the same idea behind this as behind that. So as you can see, our boxes at the moment are at the top left. That's just because of the way that most programs draw their sprites from the top left downwards, which is kind of a cool quirk, I guess, but unfortunately it's not particularly useful or helpful for us. Fortunately though, it's quite an easy fix. If I go to my main game entry and just below create manager, I'm going to call a function called center all sprite origins. Perfect. And then if I play again and I press F1, we can see that our collision boxes, circles, have been centered around the center of our objects now. The more observant of you may have also noticed that each of our objects is shifted up and to the left. That's because this function doesn't just center the collision boxes, it actually just recenters the sprite around what was previously the top left. So it's basically assuming that it's drawing from the center outwards instead of from the top left and then down and to the right. So that's why they've just shifted up a little bit and a bit to the left. Cool. So now we have our collision circles in the right place, but unfortunately they're not particularly the right size. The one for the coin is a little bit too big, and the one for the agent is a little bit too small. In our previous videos, we went over this create game object function, and we added this value, which is 50 for both, which is the collision radius. Now what you can do is you can just mess with these numbers if you want, just make them bigger and smaller until you get something that works for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to base the size of our collision circle based on the actual height of the sprite. So instead of just calling these functions, I'm instead going to return two integers. These are going to be the game object IDs, which if you watch my bonus video you'll know all about them. But it's just an identifier for each of the objects. So return one for coin and one for agent. Oops. There we go. And then I'm going to use each of these IDs to get me the game objects in question. So we'll do it first for coin, using the get game object function. Oops. And then again for agent. Perfect, and that's going to return us our game objects, and then each of these game objects has a value called a radius, which we can just assign to. So we can do coin.radius equals and agent.radius equals. And then on the other side of each of these functions, we're going to use a function called getSpriteHeight, which, as you can imagine, returns the height of our sprite. But because we're assigning to the radius instead of assigning to the diameter, we're actually going to take half of this value. So it's going to look something like this. GetSpriteHeight. Oh, that needs to be a capital G. Coin dot sprite ID 2, and then the exact same thing. I'm just going to copy and paste and change coin to agent. Okay, so just to talk a little bit more about what these functions do. The coin.spriteID is going to return us our sprite rather than just returning us our game object. And we're then going to get the height of that sprite, and then we're going to divide it by 2 to get the radius that we want. And if we press play now, and press F1 again, you can see that our collision circles now look pretty good for our sprites. Perfect. Okay, so now we have our collision radiuses set up. We can now actually program our system to do something when they actually collide. So I'm going to make a function, a new function down at the bottom called isCollidingTest. In this function, I'm going to get both of the objects that we want to test for collisions between, using the same method that we've done in all of our previous tutorials. So just getting it by type. And then getting the agent as well. Perfect. And then what I'm going to do for our test is that you can do whatever you want. So in reality, in a game, you might want, when two things collide, you might want one of them to die or disappear or play an animation, or you might want a score to go up, whatever. But what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to make some text that's just going to show us whether they're colliding or not. So I'm going to do an if statement, and this is our actual collision test. We call a function called isColliding, and then feed that our two game objects that we want to test between. And then in here, I'm going to draw some text, some debug text. I'm going to take the display width and then minus 100, so it's going to be just to the left of the far right of our screen. And then I'm going to do the same thing with display height, so this will mean that it's in the bottom right of our screen, because it's just above and to the left of the very bottom right corner. We'll do minus 50 here. And then if it is colliding, I'm just going to say is colliding. Perfect. And then if it's not doing this, or if it's not colliding, I'm going to just say is not colliding. So I'll do the same thing, but just say is not colliding. Perfect. And then if we press play, we can still move our coin. Oh, I've made a bit of an oopsie here, which is that I've made this function but forgotten to call it anyway. So in our main game update function, I'm just going to call isCollidingTest. And then to stop myself from making another oopsie, of course, we need to pre-declare this at the top. And now if I press play, and I press F1, we can see that it's not colliding at the moment. I can still move my coin from the very first tutorial, and then if we push it over so the circles collide, you can see the text changing, and that's how it's colliding. Cool. So yeah, that's collisions. Pretty simple. Obviously, you'll probably want it to do something other than just display some text when you actually have a collision. But that's the basics of it. You can put whatever you want in this function. So thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.